Hi there, thanks for watching. My name is Kelsey and I will be discussing the ecological and health effects of the tanneries in Ranipet, India. The objective of this presentation is to provide an overview of the environmental and health impacts of the tanneries in Ranipet, India. We'll be doing this by exploring the following topics. First, we'll discuss the demographics of Ranipet. We'll then review the history of the leather industry in India. I'll then explain the process of producing leather, and most importantly, we'll discuss the environmental and health hazards of tanning leather. Lastly, I'll wrap up by providing you with some of the key points for you to take away. Ranipet, India is a chronically contaminated, medium-sized community that is located within the Vellore district of Tamil Nadu. On the map, you can see that the state of Tamil Nadu is located in South India, and Ranipet is located within the northern part of Tamil Nadu. Ranipet is most famous for its industrial development, particularly with the exportation of tanned leather. With this industrial area, there are about 240 small-scale tanneries 2 miles from the Parlar River. This river eventually feeds into 3 separate lakes. Let's look over at the map again. Shown here is an illustration of the extremely close proximity of the tannery, which is represented by the blue circle, and the residential area, which is represented by the triangle, and the agricultural area, which is represented by the square. This is problematic for various reasons, which we'll get into shortly. For a more realistic example, this image shows a woman hanging her laundry to dry behind her home, which shares a wall with a tannery. In India, leather has been a symbol of luxury and prestige since 3000 BC through the appearance in Hindu religious scriptures. Straps, bands, bags, bottles, and sails were some of the original desired leather products. In 1800, Marco Polo's arrival has been pinned as a pivotal moment in the beginning of India's mass leather production. Marco Polo deemed leather manufacturing to be one of the most important industries in India, which encouraged its growth and investment. In South India, leather became a key item that was traded with the Greek and Roman empires. In 1880, India began trading leather internationally. The 20th century began a new period in the trade history of leather goods in India. This is when the trading of tanned leather began. World War II surged the leather industry, increasing the number of manufacturing units by 356%. Today, India produces about 13% of the world's leather. As previously mentioned, in Ranipet alone, there are 240 tanneries. Here we can visualize the export value that is generated by the leather industry in India over the last decade. At its recorded peak, the export value was equivalent to nearly $5 billion US. From this, we can understand that much of the country's economy is dependent on this industry. Tamil Nadu, where Ranipet is located, is responsible for 70% of India's leather production. Manufacturing leather is a lengthy process. There are multiple steps that have to occur before the tanning process begins. Some of the main tanning steps include preservation, dehairing, deliming, baiting, and pickling. There are many chemical elements involved in these pre-tanning steps. Once these steps are completed, the tanning process begins. There are a few different ways to tan hides, but the most common and ironically the most hazardous is chrome tanning. Chrome tanning is when the hides are soaked in baths containing acidic salts. Then they are bathed in chromium sulfate. The wet hides produced from this are blue and referred to as wet blue or in the blue hides. So jumping back to one of the first images we saw in this presentation, wet blue hides is what we were seeing. Chrome tanning is used most widely because it's a fast and cheap process, which we all know is unfortunately highly favored in business. The entire chrome tanning process can be completed in about a day. Other methods, like vegetable tanning, may take several days. Chrome tanning is also usually more flexible than vegetable tanned leather. But why does tanning need to occur? Tanning cures leather to be soft and flexible and allows it to become other products. When leather is left completely untreated, it rots, and simply dried leather produces inflexible rawhide. So in order to produce the desired products, tanning must occur. During the last decade, industries in India have grown by more than 10 times, and accordingly, the problems related to environmental degradation have increased by many folds. Many of these environmental impacts are caused directly from tanneries as well as from the before and after processes of tanning. Tannery effluents are rated as one of the highest pollutants among the industrial waste. In Ranipet, the effluents that are discharged contain chromium, which is very problematic. Chromium is a human carcinogen. Tannery effluents affect water, soil, which contaminates produce growth and contributes to air pollution. Chromium has a soluble nature. It's extremely accessible to living organisms through multiple paths of entrance such as consumption, skin contact, and inhalation. Studies examining surface water contamination in Ranipet have found that the surface water is highly contaminated. It has been determined that a single tannery can pollute groundwater around a radius of 4 to 5 miles. In many areas, Tamil Nadu groundwater is not suitable for domestic use, forcing villagers to travel miles for water. Additionally, around Ranipet, about 212 square miles of agricultural land has been contaminated. Thousands of farmers lost their farms or part of their earning capacity because of this contamination. The chemicals needed to tan once came from Tamil Nadu Chromate and Chemicals Ltd., which has been abandoned since 1995. Along with the facilities, over 500 million pounds of chromium sludge was abandoned on the site as well. This sludge has contributed to the mass amounts of contamination of the surrounding water and soil. Additionally, in an attempt to control the waste generated from tanneries, sludge is kept in storage tanks. These waste tanks are poorly managed, so much so that 10 tannery workers drowned in toxic sludge after there was a breach in the concrete wall of the sludge storage tank. This graph visualizes the contamination findings that have been found in both residential and agricultural groundwater samples. Each of the listed elements were not only present, but found to be at concerning levels. Each element is above the EPA permissible value. Chronic exposure of tannery workers from a period of 5 months to 14 years represents a relevant risk factor for the development of diseases. These diseases have been associated with genetic damage. Studies have found that many people in Ranipet are suffering from occupational diseases such as asthma, chromium ulcers, and skin diseases. Also, as we can see, nearly every worker that has been pictured throughout this presentation is wearing minimal to no protection when working in the tanneries, and thus with the hazardous materials like chromium. In these photos, we can see the chronic skin ailments suffered by these workers. In addition to these chemical hazards, unsafe working conditions combined with dangerous machinery can be disastrous. Pictured, a young 25-year-old male lost his hand when working in a tannery. In this table, we can see more clearly the direct health impacts of working with the hazardous elements that tannery workers are surrounded and immersed in on a daily basis. We can also see what residents may suffer from due to water and soil contamination. The human carcinogens, cadmium, chromium, nickel, and lead were all found at concerning concentrations in the groundwater. Excluding nickel, each of these elements were also found in the soil. So now let's sum up this issue in 5 key points. There are 240 tanneries in Ranipet, India that are located within a concerning proximity of residential and agricultural areas as well as the close proximity to the Pralar River. Tanning leather is a lengthy process and involves various hazardous elements. Tannery workers are often working with little to no protection, which increases the risk of physical injury and developing diseases from the elements, particularly chromium. The human carcinogens, cadmium, chromium, nickel, and lead were all found at concerning concentrations in the groundwater. Excluding nickel, each of these elements were also found in the soil. Exposure to these elements puts residents and workers at high risk of developing cancer and other life-threatening diseases. Tannery effluents are ranked as one of the highest pollutants among all of the industrial waste. This is a huge issue that is currently existent in Ranipet, India, and I hope you learned a little bit about it. Thanks for watching.